First up, we're delighted to have Sherif Elbanna from JPMorgan and co. I never know if you have to say the co. And Olivier Blanchet from BNP Paribas. How are you guys doing?
Very good. Exciting news yesterday. And yeah, as I mentioned to you this morning, almost missed the session, was stuck in the traffic on Sheikh Zayed Road, but very happy to be here.
You should have got a VTOL.
Yes, exactly. 1, 2. Yeah. No, that's exactly. So definitely we need a eVTOL in order to cut the traffic jam. That's for sure.
Or an Infinity, and then you just feel like you're in a business jet. Should we just go quickly through, Olivier, what's your sort of terms are you looking for in a deal?
So we go directly to the terms. So, okay, so maybe if I can make one step back and speak about also the clients, because yesterday we speak about the supply and what the business jet industry can offer to the client, but I think also the client profile also is changing definitively. One of the most important points that we need also to keep in mind from a banking perspective is the fact that almost 60% to 70% of the worldwide wealth will move from the baby boomers generation to the Generation Z, or what we call the emerging alpha generation. And the way they consume this type of asset is currently changing, which means that also the way to finance them, to advise them, has also to change. So coming back to your initial question.
Actually, we'll come back to that, my original. In what way do you think the way they're using assets is different?
I think there was a common, let's say, between the two generations, there's definitely a common concept, which is the time saving. So time saving is very important. That's the reason why you decide to buy or to charter a business jet. Client experience is also very important. But yesterday, I don't remember who mentioned the fact that connectivity is much more important than the shower you should have in your VIP or BBJ or SEJ. So time saving, yes, but the way you will consume, the way you use the business jet will be slightly different. That's one thing. The second point is that if you look at back what happens, especially in Europe, because in the Middle East it's slightly different maybe, is what happened with l'avion de Bernard, we say in French, where now it's become very easy to track all the flights, to track all the very well-known person on their business jet. So which means that the way you will own, the ownership concept has to change also, because another common concept between the two generations is the privacy. And the privacy has also, the way you will structure the privacy has also to change. So that's one of the second point I wanted to mention.
I like that. That's really interesting. Sherif, this wealth transfer that Olivier mentions is something you hear about a lot. How does JPMorgan see it?
So, okay, so as a start, we always start with the client, right? Who the client is and what the wealth objectives are. And then we would work with the client to help them explore the full wealth potential. And whether it's first generation, second generation, we spend a lot of time at the beginning when we're commencing the relationship, understanding that. And as Olivier was alluding to, we are now seeing more and more clients in their early 40s looking to buy aircrafts, not necessarily of the same size, maybe smaller, but we're seeing a lot of interest that's coming from younger clients.
And are you worried that they may choose fractional or charter?
You're referring fractional ownership. Yes, we come across fractional ownership. It's not something that we would look to provide financing for. There are other ways where we can assist our clients to have a fractional ownership. But yeah, the thing that we look at normally is pre-owned, new purchase, construction finance, etc.
Okay, so I think Olivier was right. What sort of clients, credits, do they have to have an existing JPMorgan relationship or be a client JPMorgan wants? So
we would work with both new and existing clients. The premise of it, at JPMorgan Private Bank, we are a wealth manager, first and foremost. So any existing or new client has to have a holistic relationship with JPMorgan. Includes aircraft financing, but on the other side as well, wealth management solutions.
And Olivier, same for you?
Yes, I think more or less that's the same concept. I think in order also to give you a bit of background, to lend a balance sheet has a cost. And if you look at the banking regulations under the umbrella of Basel IV regulation, it becomes more and more demanding in terms of capital when you lend money against an aircraft. Just to give you an example, is the fact that lending money directly to a private owner is like to lend money for a student loan. You believe that? Which means that the banking authorities in Basel don't take into account the value of the mortgage. We try to make a lot of effort to explain this, but they consider that this activity, as a lenders, is much more risky to lend against real estate, for instance. So the point for the bank in that case is beyond a transaction for financing a business jet. We need to develop a global banking relationship with our clients. We need to well understand that beyond the transaction we can do, we want, let's say, to develop a private banking relationship. This is what JPMorgan and BNP Paribas are doing, but maybe beyond also corporate investment banking relationship as well. So
I don't think anyone in the room wants us to spend 40 minutes talking about Basel, but Basel IV has just come in.
Yeah, but this rules was previously the same before, but the requirement in terms of capital is more and more important, including for when we lend against a business jet.
And for people who aren't familiar, the Basel rules from the Bank of International Settlements are where you have to set aside a certain amount of collateral for every loan. So the idea is if your loans go wrong, you've got safe collateral in treasuries that can be released at a time.
You would set aside capital against any of your loans. The level of capital depends on what the loan is and what the collateral backing the loan. The higher the capital is set aside would mean higher cost of finance, effectively.
And Basel II, an aircraft loan was what, 5% or lower than 5%? And Basel IV, we're talking.
Okay, I don't want to be too much technical here, but to make the long story short, I repeat, when you lend 100 against a business jet, the capital requirement will be exactly the same than to have unsecured, or to provide an unsecured loan, which means that today, the banking authorities don't take into account the value of the mortgage, the value of the collateral.
Which is crazy.
Believe or believe not, that's something from our perspective is totally crazy.
Yeah.
And we try to explain, look at, for instance, the leasing company. So the reason why many companies all over the world decided, let's say, to be strongly involved in operational leasing, taking a risk on the residual value, which means that under the worst case scenario, there is a residual value, and it is a shame that the banking authorities doesn't take into account this aspect. But it is what it is. And we have to play with these rules, and we have to adapt ourselves in order to meet the requirements also of our clients. That's the game.
But the good news is that Basel is like the Fast and the Furious. There's always another one coming. So,
yeah.
Okay, we've had the technical talk. What sort of parameters are you looking? You've got a very strong client. He's got a good bank relationship. He's buying a ultra long range aircraft. You know, what sort of terms are we looking at? And I'm not asking you about pricing.
I was wondering if you will go there. But,
that's the next question.
I think our approach when we, assuming it's the right client, we are a good fit as a firm and a client, and then the next step is aircraft financing. How much would we lend against this aircraft, right? We don't have a blanket loan to value that we would apply to any and each aircraft that we look at. It depends on what the condition is of the aircraft, the circumstances of the client, and market standard, what the volatility in the price, the saleable value of this aircraft. Going back to the circumstances of the client, not all our clients would want to go to the maximum 90% loan to value that we could go to. Some of them like to keep the leverage on a moderate levels. Some of them would think the cost of financing, especially where we are with interest rates, is too high, so maybe have a hybrid of aircraft financing and borrowing against an investment portfolio. Others would align a long-term asset to a long-term liability regardless of the interest rate. But just going back to your question, in terms of loan to value, assuming very good condition and meets all the new and shiny, and it's the right client, we could go up to a 90% LTV for the long ranges that you mentioned.
Olivier?
Well, to complete what Sherif just said, there is no black box, and more or less we have the same parameter. Maybe if I had to, well, I can add maybe something in terms of financial analysis. The first thing is that we provide fully tailor-made financing, which means that we need to sit down with the client to well understand his requirements and to well understand why you want to add some financing expenses on top of the operating charges, because it's not so easy to make, I mean, as a private owner, to generate positive cash flow with this type of asset. Equity gains, maybe that's another topic, but to generate on a regular basis positive cash flow, it's quite challenging. So we need to well understand the global picture in order, let's say, to fine-tune the loan amortization profile. And it goes without saying that what we like, of course, is asset coming from the usual suspect, such as Bombardier, Gulfstream, Dassault, Embraer, and so on. But it doesn't mean that we also exclude smaller business jets. I'm coming from Switzerland, so we like very much the Pilatus, the PC-12 and the PC-24. But also we keep an eye open on what's happening to the market for eVTOL and hybrid aircraft. So that's also something that we look at it, because I think that's something, it's clearly the new generation, and this new type of asset are shaping the future as well. And as a bank, we need to keep an eye open on what happens in that field.
We've heard a lot about the Middle East region booming. We've seen a lot of people move to Dubai. What's your general attitude towards the region from a lending perspective?
So first, I'm from the Middle East, as you can probably tell, and the bulk of my clients are based here in the Middle East. So I'm naturally biased. But let's look at some of the facts. The region overall, Middle East, Gulf countries in particular, has been very resilient and quick to adapt to uncertainties in the global economy. Taking Saudi as an example, recently boosting foreign reserve over 450 billion, gearing up for external challenges such as US tariffs, also fine-tuning infrastructure spend to ensure long-term growth. Dubai, diversified economy, strategic location, on the forefront of innovation and sustainability, which position it as a leader in the move towards a varied and sustainable economic model. The common theme in the Gulf countries really is leveraging the natural resources and smart fiscal policies to remain stable and grow regardless of the global uncertainties. And I would add to that our view as a firm, that we see a significant opportunity in the region. We believe in the growth potential, we believe in the leadership of the region, and we are committed to doing business here. We've been working with Middle Eastern clients for over 100 years. Our first branch was in Beirut in 1952. And today we work with governments, financial institutions, family offices from all over the region.
It's the same for you.
I think clearly aviation sector is definitively a good source of revenues diversification for Middle East. And if I look at what happens recently in Saudi Arabia, for instance, Havilis has their headquarters in Saudi Arabia. They just recently raised $1.5 billion for acquiring airliners, but not only airliners, also corporate jets. And more than 20 international banks decided, let's say, to be involved in this transaction, out of which JPMorgan and BNP Paribas. What does it mean? That means that clearly the analysis of the international bank is that the Middle East paving the ground for developing an aviation hub between Asia and Europe. And we consider that the Middle East has a very good card to play. And coming back on Dubai and Abu Dhabi, I would say that if you consider what happened during the last 2 years with two laws, Federal Decree Law of 2024 and 2023, the General Civil Aviation Authority decided, let's say, to describe precisely the way to register, but also deregister. That's an important topic for the banks. And I would like to thank you, the General Civil Aviation Authority, for that, because it provides clearly the framework and the guidelines to the condition of eligibility as registration under the Abu Dhabi and Dubai register, but also the EIE register, but also to deregister, irrespective of the fact that UAE is also a signatory of the Captain Convention. So all these things are very, very important. And last but not least, if you look at the two latest developments, I think think it was last week, the General Civil Aviation Authorities provide their God blessing to develop the hybrid airport in Abu Dhabi for eVTOL and helicopter, which is a very nice and very smart move, giving some additional facilities to fly from a short flight from Abu Dhabi to Dubai or Sharjah, because Sharjah also has a very interesting airport because they have a lot of flexibility in terms of slots compared to what you have, for instance, in Hong Kong or in Singapore. So all these things demonstrate that clearly that a huge willingness and huge confidence in the Middle East to develop business aviation and this hub between Asia and Europe.
Okay, we've got lots of audience questions, so we'll go to how do you monitor the asset during the loan period?
Monitor what, sorry?
How do you monitor the aircraft during the contract period, and what does an operator or owner have to expect?
So as a start, monitoring the value of the aircraft on an annual basis. In JPMorgan, we have a center of excellence based in the US, which is our equipment finance team, that we would require reports, an operational report, and on that basis we would produce internally an appraisal of that aircraft. So you would expect the standard covenants around the maintenance of the aircraft, the engine, etc.
And I'm sure it's the same for BNP.
Yes, definitely. We have a loan-to-value covenants on a quarterly basis. We check the value of the aircraft, but that's purely theoretical, I would say. But the most important point is to have the right operator behind the asset, and we have also some regular talks with the operator, because the operator is clearly the gatekeeper of the asset we finance.
Do you require a parts program or tip to tail as a condition, or for a power by the hour type program?
Yes, of course, it's an aspect. It supports the intrinsic value of the asset, and the worst case scenario, it will help, let's say, to remarket the business jet. I repeat, under an adverse scenario. So it's clearly useful.
I mean, engine maintenance program is good to have, but they're not mandatory.
Not mandatory, okay. I like your mention of Basel 4, sorry. And someone is asking, do you see the lending landscape getting bigger or smaller in the future?
It's a challenging question. The question, and coming back to the change of a generation, is it depends how the new generation will consume this type of asset. If we consider that in the next 10 years, 20 years, the ownership is not the mainstream, which means that they prefer to charter, which means that in that case, a lot of leasing company, lessor, as we have in their commercial airliners, has to request some funds in order to be able to buy some fleet for chartering out the business jet. So the way maybe to lend the money will change, which means that we also, as a bank, need also to change slightly the way we lend our money in the next 10 or 15 years. Don't know, but this is something that on which all the banks need to keep an eye open.
I think it will always come down to what's more expensive, cost of equity or cost of debt, right? If you, as a client, believe in low interest rates environment, for example, and you believe you could get higher returns on the equity that you have, probably borrow more in high interest rate environment where perhaps you're not generating significant returns on your equity, or it's the other way around.
So you see that there'll always be the private banks who are committed. I suppose the industry lost one when UBS and Credit Suisse merged, but you've got you guys who will always be competitive. You'll always be fighting for the top clients. Do you think there's a gap below that? I know we've got a leasing panel with Global Jet Capital and IC Leasing who are doing, who've come in to fill one gap. But do you think there's a shortage of lenders below that, who will finance a charter operator with their own aircraft or?
Clearly today there is a gap. There is a gap, but again, that has to be factored in the strategy of the banks. It's always a question of pricing, and I would say, and coming back to the capital requirement today, if you look at what happens on the corporate investment banking side, most of the commercial companies, the airliners, they are decided 10 or 15 years ago, decided, let's say, to take it off all the aircraft from their balance sheet. And now the main, let's say, owners are lessors. And they lease their aircraft to the airliners company. The question is, if we consider that we will have the same move in the next coming years, due to, again, I repeat, the way we consume the business jet, today, the banking industry is not really ready yet, but it doesn't mean that it will not change in the next coming years. It's a question mark.
You could start offering operating leases?
Operating lease, for the time being, is definitively not our cup of tea, because we don't like, let's say, to have on our balance sheet this type of asset. It's not our job. But the question is that we can find some people, company, investors ready to take the ownership risk, as we see, for instance, in other industries. It works.
Okay, that's really interesting. Question from Yusuf. And does anyone want to make a comment or question in the room, old style? Yusuf is saying, do you offer dry lease options to operators? Sorry, I put it. It's coming now.
Enough finance available for?
Would you do private-only dry lease option?
Private. It's a tricky question. I personally, through my work as well in the private bank, I don't come across a lot of private financing for private operators. But
unfortunately, and I repeat, unfortunately, this is not something that we provide. But again, as always said internally, when we have some requirement from our clients, we need to sit down to understand the rationale behind and try to find some solutions. But again, it's something that, for the time being, we don't offer. That's for sure.
In some instances where we would have some of our clients that need to raise some funds, debt, effectively, to support their company, be it a private company or otherwise, we would look to help, but not in the format that is asked in the question, as in debt against the private operator.
Do you offer Islamic leases?
We don't.
We have seen in the past some Muraba financing. This is something that we are doing on the cooperative investment banking side, but it has been a long time that we didn't structure a Muraba financing. But in theory, yes, this is something that we can offer. But recently, we didn't receive any request on in that field.
They're harder to unwind, aren't they? I think breaking is harder. Okay, quick fire. Olivier, how are sustainability-linked loans being structured in business jet finance?
Okay, big question. So, and coming back to the new generation, there is something a bit contradictory in terms of client requirements. The new generation wants to save time, but at the same time, they want to align their causes with their value, and part of their value is the sustainability. And it is also clearly at the heart of the strategy of BNP Paribas, the sustainability. And we have seen yesterday a presentation of Airbus. And as you have seen, Airbus decided to also integrate all these aspects in their offer. That's point number one. So we need, let's say, in terms of storytelling, but beyond the storytelling, we need, let's say, to see how we could manage this need to save time by using a business jet, but at the same time, you want, let's say, to do something good for the planet in terms of global warming. So you need to, let's say, reduce your environmental footprint, which means that you want to reduce your CO2 emission, which means that in that case, you need, let's say, first of all, maybe to buy a new jet, a business jet, with a better fuel efficiency, point number one. Point number two, ideally, if you can, let's say, use sustainable aviation fuel, it's also a way to do it. But if you look at the price of sustainable aviation fuel, it's much more expensive than the jet fuels. 4 times, I think the gap in terms of pricing is 4 times. But if you want, let's say, to align with your values, this is something that you can do. And again, instead of own an aircraft, charter or lease the aircraft. Maybe it's also the solution.
In the Airbus presentation, they showed how they're trialing aircraft flying like geese in formation. If a family agreed to always fly like that, would you give them a cheaper margin?
Good question.
More seriously. Quick question, last question. Older aircraft. Do you finance pre-owned aircraft, and why is it nearly impossible to find a lender willing to finance an aircraft older than 10 to 15 years?
We would look at aircraft that's older if it's well maintained and the condition is, again, difficult to opine on a specific case, but we have in the past looked at aircraft that is older, albeit well maintained, good condition, all of that, good operator. And
I think the comment here is true. It is fair to say that we don't like finance aircraft above 15 years. Even though we can discuss in detail this concept because from intrinsic value, the most important thing maybe is not the age, but the engine's hours, I would say, is like a car. But from a banking perspective, we always look at the adverse scenario, and we land at 5 to 7 years, usually with, let's say, a loan profile of 10 to 12 years. The problem is that if we have, let's say, to remarket an asset above 15 years, it will be a bit more challenging. and this is something that we would like to avoid. And last but not least, based on what I said about sustainability and the need, let's say, to reduce our carbon print, from a banking perspective, we would like to avoid the risk of stranded assets. And that's the reason why we try to avoid, let's say, not to go above 15 years.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sherif. That was great.